Good morning. Thank you for joining us for today's announcement about funding for housing in the Yukon. With us today, we have the Minister responsible for the Yukon Housing Corporation, Pauline Frost, the Honourable Ahmed Hussein, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, and Minister responsible for the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and Yukon's own Member of Parliament, Larry Bagnall. Mary Thiessen is with us today, providing sign language interpretation. Thank you for being here, Mary. Following the remarks from our speakers, we will go to questions from reporters. If anyone on the line is having trouble hearing us, please email ecoinfo@yukon.ca. I'll now hand it over to our Member of Parliament, Mr. Larry Bagnall.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Mary, for being here. Bonjour, bienvenue, danger. And thanks for the media for taking time to join us today. And I'll just acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Kwantlen First Nation and the Taan-Quachin Council. Merci d'avoir pris le temps de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui. Trinquizi Shilikat. Just before I start this announcement, just to let the media know, another one of our ministers, Seamus O'Regan, is doing an important announcement about an hour. I can't tell you what it is because it's embargoed, but you could call me at the office at 668-6565. It's on critical minerals. And to the reporters, big shout out to Yukon reporters. I think the reporters down south where they get one topic they get to cover, whereas in the Yukon you may have one or two reporters, you have to cover everything, so you get tons of things coming across your desk. But I think you've been here for a while, certainly Chuck has, and you know that there's not many announcements more critical or important than this, that there's nothing much more important than housing in the Yukon, affordable housing. You've heard it as much as I have over the years, and I mean, that's why I've been proponent of, for over a decade, of housing first. I mean, you can't do much without a house at 40 below. So it's really important. So this is a very important announcement. And every day, just like you, I have talked to constituents who tell me their top concern is housing affordability, that they need a place to live and make a difference for raising their family, planning their future, and living in dignity. And this is where the National Housing Strategies National Co-Investment Fund comes to play. By supporting initiatives such as the one we are announcing today, it encourages a stable supply of affordable housing options for Canada's most vulnerable populations. The federal government is back in housing, as you remember, those of you who were here last week with our big $34 million announcement. And the work we're doing right now through the National Housing Strategy and its various programs is going to be transformational for so many people and families in the Yukon. So I'm really motivated, as I have been for years, on behalf of Yukoners to continue to tackle the housing crisis that's happening both in Whitehorse and in the rural communities. Every day, our government takes concrete action to improve housing affordability and build relationships with local governments to get housing built where it's needed most, from coast to coast to coast. I want to congratulate everyone involved, especially those working so hard in Minister Hussein's office, Minister Frost's office, in CMHC, and in Yukon Housing to solve our shared goal of a new generation of housing across Canada. That takes a lot of work in the background. So now to share more detail about the work and make this exciting announcement, I have a great pleasure to introduce again my colleague, the Honourable Ahmed Hussein, Minister of Families, Children's and Social Development, and Minister responsible for Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Mr. Hussein was first elected in 2015 to represent the riding of York South Weston. In 2017, Prime Minister appointed Minister Hussein to the role of Minister of Immigration, making him the first Somali Canadian to hold a cabinet post. And as I mentioned last week, and some of the reporters, probably Chuck, will remember this, he was a great minister for the Yukon of Immigration. He came up here and really was very flexible and helpful for us in that. So Minister Hussein, you're on. I'm looking forward to you making this exciting announcement with Minister Frost.
Thank you so much, Larry. It is such a pleasure to join you as well as joining Minister Frost. And thank you for the kind introduction. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you here today virtually from the city of Toronto, the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to recognize that today is the National Day of Observance to commemorate the people who lost their lives this year and the significant impacts that we have all felt because of COVID-19 pandemic. Aujourd'hui, notre grande famille canadienne pleure la perte tragique de plus de 22 000 parents, frères et sœurs, amis et proches. Today, our great Canadian family mourns the tragic loss of more than 22,000 parents, siblings, friends, and loved ones. Every single Canadian has experienced loss and sacrifice over the past year as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we come together to honor the memory of those we have lost and the people they left behind, we also take this time to pay tribute to all of our amazing healthcare and other essential workers who continue to put themselves at risk every day so that we can get the services and care that we need. These essential and frontline workers are literally putting their lives on the line to keep all of us safe. We thank you now more than ever. I'm pleased, of course, to join Minister Frost and MP Bagnall this morning for this yet important announcement. Toutes les personnes présentes ici partagent un objectif commun. Nous sommes tous déterminés à faire en sorte que chaque Canadien ait un chez-soi sûr et abordable. All of us here today share a common goal. We are all committed to ensuring that each and every Canadian has a safe and affordable place to call home. But we also know that far too many Canadians are forced to make the impossible choice between paying their rent and buying groceries. And the current COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated, underscored, and worsened existing housing challenges. And as we've all sheltered in place to stop the spread of COVID-19, our homes have become a place of refuge, a place of safety. Dans des temps de crise, les plus vulnérables de nos communautés sont souvent les plus durement touchés. In a time of crisis, the hardest hit are often the most vulnerable in our communities. I've spoken directly with many families from coast to coast to coast who've been impacted by this crisis, and they've shared their concerns and the challenges that they continue to face. C'est pourquoi notre gouvernement a agi rapidement pour faire parvenir un soutien important aux Canadiens. That is why very early during this pandemic, our government acted quickly to provide relief to Canadians. From increases to the Canada Child Benefit, to the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, to the now Canada Recovery Benefit, to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, and other supports, we worked to ensure that no Canadian would be faced with the impossible choice between paying their rent and putting food on the table. But we didn't stop there. We also announced the creation of a new program called the Rapid Housing Initiative, a $1 billion program which will enable us to create up to 3,000 new affordable housing units from coast to coast to coast with 100% federal contribution. These are only some of the measures that we've taken to ensure that no Canadian is left behind. Through our national housing strategy, our 10-year, nearly $70 billion plan, which will provide every Canadian a place to call home, we launched landmark programs to boost housing supply. Mais nous savons que les défis au Canada en matière de logement sont complexes et que nos solutions doivent être adaptées pour soutenir des populations différentes avec des besoins différents. But we also know that Canada's housing challenges are complex, and our solutions to those housing challenges must be tailored to support different populations with different housing needs. Ensuring housing affordability for all Canadians is not a quick fix. Larry Bagnell knows that. Minister Frost knows that. It calls for partnership. It calls for a long-term plan to create more affordable housing supply, especially for our most vulnerable populations. Ce qui nous amène à la raison pour laquelle nous sommes ici aujourd'hui, which brings us to why we're here today. We're here today because notre gouvernement accorde 20 millions de dollars au cours des 5 prochaines années pour soutenir la création d'au moins 79 nouveaux logements qui sont centralisés, abordables et accessibles. Our government is providing $20 million over the next 5 years to help support the construction of at least 79 new affordable housing units that are central, affordable, accessible, and energy efficient. Funding is delivered through the National Housing Strategy Co-Investment Fund as part of a Northern Housing Carve Out specifically created for the Yukon territory. This carve out totals an amount of $40 million. So we're dedicating $20 million of that $40 million today to build 79 new affordable housing units. I've worked very closely with MP Larry Bagnell over the last number of years, and we wanted to make sure that this carve-out and this funding would address identified housing pressures in rural communities in Yukon and in Whitehorse. The challenges faced by families in the North need to be addressed with targeted investments to ensure that the most vulnerable in the community receive the support they need. This means making sure that no one is left behind, whether it's a young worker in Whitehorse who will benefit from the jobs that this funding creates to build more affordable housing, because it will create jobs when they're needed the most, or a senior couple living in a rural part of Yukon looking for an affordable place to call home that meets their specific needs. Today, by the way, this announcement builds on our announcement from just last week that will help create 84 new supportive housing units for seniors in Normandy Manor. Ceci est une autre étape importante qui nous aidera à franchir notre objectif d'assurer que chacun et chacune au Yukon ait un chez-soi sûr et abordable. This is yet another important step in the right direction to help provide every resident across Yukon with a safe and affordable place to call home. J'aimerais remercier tout le monde qui a travaillé très fort pour rendre cette annonce possible. I want to thank everyone involved in coming together to make this possible. I also want to especially thank Minister Frost for her dedication to affordable housing, for her partnership and collaboration with our government to make sure that we deliver these kinds of investments to the Yukon. Thank you for your partnership and your collaboration over the years. Most of all, I want to wish all the future residents of these 79 units, affordable housing units, the best in their future, as they soon will be able to call these wonderful developments home. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you, Minister Hussein. It's great to have you joining us again remotely this week. I'll now hand it over to Minister Pauline Frost.
Van Quincy, good morning. It's really great to be here with you all. Certainly a very special day for Yukon. It's an honor, an absolute pleasure to be here on the traditional territory of Kwanlin into Onquichin Council to make this announcement with the federal minister responsible for housing, the $40 million of new investments here in Yukon, as indicated, will go a long ways to addressing our housing challenges across the north. Masi Cho also to Minister Hussein for your dedication, your commitment to working collaboratively with me, myself, and my northern colleagues in addressing the unique circumstances of the north. I think realizing the significance of our unique building nature of building in the north, climate change, adaptation, the envelopes that we're looking at into the future in terms of efficiencies and making sure we meet the demand and the pressures. Thank you, my good friend, our MP Larry Bagnell, for being here, being always an advocate for Yukon. In recognition of the additional funding needs in northern communities, the $40 million of the National Co-Investment Fund, which was launched in 2018, was prioritized for Yukon. The funding, the Northern Carve Out funding, really took a while to get here. It took a lot of collaboration and a lot of discussions. Yukon Housing Corporation and Canada Mortgage and Housing recently concluded discussions on how we will use the $40 million parcel that had been allocated for the Yukon. Yukon Housing Corporation will be solely responsible for the allocation and management of $20 million over the next 5 years. As indicated, we will endeavor to bring 75 to 79 new units into the market in the next 5 years. Funding will support new community housing priorities around the territory, which will help Yukoners on our waitlist find affordable housing that meets their needs. The additional $20 million will be managed by Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation in collaboration with our partners, our First Nations partners, our corporations, and of course Yukon Housing Corporation, as we look at private sector investments and projects here in the Yukon. We will look to our Housing Action Plan for Yukon, the Aging in Place Action Plan, and the Safe at Home to end and prevent homelessness, and the recommendations from Putting People First to ensure the new community housing projects meet the needs of Yukoners across the housing continuum. Our projects will address recognized community needs as raised by community partners and departments, such as the Men's Shelter in Watson Lake and a new duplex in Destruction Bay. We will work towards the goals of aging in place, increasing the number of accessible dwellings in Yukon Housing Corporation's stock by 35%. This will provide the option for Yukoners with mobility needs to remain in their homes and home communities as they age. The funding criteria also supports the construction of housing to meet the needs of our most vulnerable people and will address the goals of the Safe at Home to end and prevent homelessness. In addition, Yukon Housing Corporation projects built under this fund will be energy efficient, reducing current greenhouse gas emissions and units by 50%. Our government is actively working towards meeting the goals established under our climate change strategy, Our Clean Future. The agreement also supports the government in addressing priorities identified through community partnerships, through community engagement, and through housing needs assessments. This funding is an excellent example of partnership in action with the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation that makes a real difference in the lives of Yukoners. We are working together to address priorities to build healthy, vibrant, and sustainable communities here across the North. We encourage First Nations governments, organizations, community housing providers, and private sector to pursue access to these funds. We are thankful for the support of our First Nations governments, our Yukon municipalities, our community and non-government organizations and partners to continue to work on new housing projects that will meet identified housing needs in our rural Yukon communities. Our work is aligned with our partners in ensuring Yukoners have homes that meet their needs that they can afford. I'd like to just reflect for a moment on the announcement last week in collaboration with this funding. So we have on the market now in excess of $70 million allocated for Yukon affordability, social housing, seniors, aging in place, and very honored to say it would not have happened without the collaboration with our partners in Canada, with Canada, Minister Hussein and my northern colleague and my northern ministers in Nunavut and NWT collaborating cooperatively to bring forward our joint efforts, of course, and to having those difficult conversations. Today, we celebrate this announcement and the investment towards community housing And as I noted at the start, this is a very special day for Yukon. Masicho, hi.
Thank you, Minister Frost. We'll now go to our reporters on the line for questions, and we'll start with Stephanie, the Yukon News.
Hi, this question is for Pauline. You mentioned encouraging First Nations government, private sector, community groups to pursue access to these funds. And I'm just wondering what that process will look like and when we might, see some projects get started.
Okay, thank you. At the moment, we have concluded some of our housing assessments and community engagements. We did in November a broad community engagement town hall discussions, really working towards identifying the community-based needs. We've also, as I just noted, we have our housing action plan, Safe at Home to End Homelessness strategies, and of course, we've retooled the profile that we have at the Housing Corporation to better align and with our funding envelopes and making it easier and more accessible to our Housing Initiative Fund through our partnership funds. And we will continue to look at flexibility and making it as seamless as possible. We have already identified some initiatives that we are hearing back from the communities on. So as I noted in my opening comments, we have a project in Watson Lake that has been identified for us through the municipality, through the First Nations, and through our partners there, that there's a need for a men's shelter, and that's where we're focusing some of our resources. We also know that we are going to look at putting in place a duplex in Dawson City, the next largest center in our community, in our Yukon. So those are a couple of things. I want to just encourage the proponents, the partners, to please contact and work with the staff at the Yukon Housing Corporation. They will give you the details that you need to access the funding. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just wondering when we might see these projects, Watson Lake Men's Shelter and the duplex in Dawson, work begin on the ground.
Thank you. That's a really, really awesome question. As you know, a year ago, we had the Lakeview Manor in Watson Lake that had closed, and we had 22 individuals in that facility that were displaced, and it's posed a key priority and a pressure for that community. So we've worked very quickly with the community to address housing needs and the pressures there. So we see this as imminent. We see it as a need now, not sometime into the future. So you will see in this year's budget resources to address the design and the development of that facility, and it will be done in collaboration with our partners in Watson Lake. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll now go to Luke with CKRW.
No questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. We'll then go to Chuck with the Whitehorse Star.
Good morning. I'm just wondering, are these housing initiatives mostly focused on multi-unit developments? I mean, Minister Frost, you just mentioned, the duplex for Dawson City. I don't really call that a multi-unit housing development, but I'm thinking, are we looking at apartment complexes over single-family and duplex housing? Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you. Of course, complex needs in all of our communities. You addressed the pressures that we're seeing in some of our communities. So what we are looking at is trying to align with the community needs. And, a good example is what we're hearing from the community of Teslin. They wanted a larger facility. So those conversations will continue to happen in that community. We have projects that we're looking at in Ross River. We're having conversations with Destruction Bay. We continue to have long-term conversations and the community conversations around the needs assessment will commence over the course of this next coming weeks and months, and clearly identifying what the core needs and base are for each one of our communities. It's up to the communities really to identify. We're not certainly not here to impose anything. We're here to collaborate and work in partnership with our communities to align with their housing pressures. And we know right now that we're seeing significant pressures on our affordability and our units that we currently have within the corporation. So that's why it's critical that we also look at the private sector, we look at the nonprofit organizations, and we look at partners across the spectrum of housing. Thank you.
Thanks. Chuck, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, maybe just, I'm just wondering, so $20 million over 5 years, it's at $4 million a year. Does it work that way, or is it just, here's $20 million, and it's got to be spent in 5 years? Could be $10 million next year and $5 the year after, or is it more, is it split up like $4 million each year?
Thank you for the question. As we noted in the opening, we have $40 million to be spent over 5 years. Of course, not possible for us to focus on all that in one fiscal year, so we have spread that out, and we're aligning it to match the needs of the communities, and of course aligning it certainly with the pressures in each one of our communities. So the carve out that we see is significant. It's significant in addressing pressures across the north. The $20 million that's allocated to Yukon Housing Corporation, we have some indication from our communities where they would like to see us focus. We have the other $20 million that's sitting there with our partners to review and assess as time evolves, and we will look at, of course, how that is delivered across the Yukon, and we'll do that within the time frame specified within this carve-out. Thank you.
I just want to add a point about the carve-out. The carve-out is the total carve-out is $40 million, and it is dedicated to the Yukon. And we trust Yukon to use that carve-out as they see fit within the, of course, the broad framework of the co-investment fund. But make no mistake, it is Yukon that controls that carve-out. It is Yukon that will determine how to spend that carve-out, and it is basically the result of the advocacy of Larry Bagnell, who secured that carve-out for Yukon, $40 million to address the particular housing pressures. Now, that doesn't mean that Yukon cannot get access to the rest of the co-investment money in the billions of dollars, but $40 million is a special carve-out for Yukon. It is within the control of Yukon, and it is really as a leadership, or the leadership of Larry Bagnell, who advocated for that carve-out, because he said Yukon needs a particular carve-out within the co-investment fund to make sure that we deal with the immediate housing pressures. Where that money is going to go, how quickly, which projects, that's something that we trust Yukon with, and it is done in the sense of collaboration, trust, and partnership, and true trust in the territorial government, because they know where the pressures are. They know how to deploy that $40 million with the biggest impact for the residents of Yukon, and we trust them. But we want to continue to be a partner and to deliver those federal dollars so that Yukon can address its housing shortages.
Thank you. If I just may add a little more information. So the Northern Housing carve-out is a unique arrangement with our territory. It provides 75% funding for the project. So the Yukon government will, address the difference in the 25%. So we have that current arrangement right now, which means that you will see significantly more than $40 million in the envelope as we go forward. So 25% on top of that as we look at projects. We've seen collaboration, as we indicated last week, with our municipal matching grant, our partnership with our municipalities, our First Nations government. So I want to just make that note, because it's not just sitting at 40 million. We will see significant input by our communities and our partners, so they come to the table with resources as well. And that, as we saw last week, is a complete collaboration of industry, community, and private sector addressing housing pressures and needs in the Yukon. So merci.
Thank you. We'll now go to Steve with CBC.
Hey, I would like to get some clarity on who ultimately gets the money. Would those people be developers, I presume? And what kind of money is it? Is it like straight up free cash, mortgages, another kind of loan, that kind of thing? Could you clarify that for me, please?
Okay, thank you. So, no, I would say that you won't get straight up cash. I think as we work with our proponents, the Housing Corporation has a very robust system established in terms of its criteria on how houses are built, where current needs are. The 75-25% differences allows us to, broader expand the resources we have, and we do that very nicely with our Housing Initiative Fund. We review the criteria, we review the project so that it meets the building code requirements. Efficiency is a significant component, as well as alignment with community core housing needs. So there's a number of criteria that have been established already, good practices, and the shift in the Yukon Housing Corporation over the course of the last 4 years to better align with those needs. I want to just commend them for doing such an exceptional job and addressing pressures in our communities, but still stepping up and making the resources we have go a long ways. And we've brought now into our housing spectrum over 350 units through a process that has been redesigned and established through our partnership build efforts and through our housing initiative efforts. So collaboration structures have been established. Partners are encouraged to please connect with the Yukon Housing Corporation. They will set you on the right track in accessing the resources that are available to through this $20 million initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm still not totally quite sure how the money, like where it's going specifically, but so this money will go to private developers, and are these housing initiatives that will get this money, they're going to continue being private, I presume, or will the government be owning any of these properties? And can you confirm that? Like, is it basically going to private entities to then build these structures and then profit off it, essentially? Is that how it works, or will the Yukon government be owning these?
Okay, thank you. The $20 million of the $40 million will be allocated to projects directly managed and delivered by the Yukon Housing Corporation. The rest will be managed directly by CMHC for projects submitted by Indigenous governments and organizations, community housing providers, and private sector. CMHC and Yukon Housing Corporation have worked very closely around that, and we will continue to participate and collaborate around the delivery of the $20 million that will be managed by CMHC. We have conducted comprehensive reviews that will, over the course of the last 4 years, it really identifies where we should be putting our resources, and funding is available, as I indicated, to municipalities, Indigenous governments, organizations, and community housing providers. The private sector and in our communities are very much a part of our community, and are encouraged to please submit projects that support all governments, that support the needs of all of our community members. So it's a diverse approach, but it's intended to be that way. It's intended to work, in the true fashion, in true sense, as we do in the Yukon, to connect in with all of our partners and all of the building. The industry is vast in the Yukon. We have complex systems in place, and again, the Housing Corporation would be happy to work with our partners in our communities because each community unto itself is unique and has its own unique set of circumstances, and we want to build around the uniquenesses of each one of our communities. Thank you.
I'll just add to that on your related to your first question. The CMHC is very flexible and Yukon Housing and the types of ways the money's flowed. Remember last week, the private sector was so excited about the very, very flexible mortgage agreements that had been made for that announcement. So there's lots of flexibility to make sure projects go ahead. And as the Minister Hussein said, two of our big important objectives are affordability and environmental. And just to give you some technical background on those related to affordability, projects have to be maintained at least 30% of the units for 20 years have to be on average of 80% below the median market rental rate. And related to vulnerable people, which as I mentioned right at the beginning is a very high priority for us, and energy, 35% of the units have to be accessible. And for energy, they have to be at least, energy greenhouse gas emissions have to be reduced by 50% from either the National Energy Code or the National Building Code. So these projects fulfill some other objectives as well.
Thank you very much. That concludes our announcement for today. Thank you to Minister Hussein for joining us remotely by Zoom, and thank you to MP Bagnall and Minister Frost for being here today. And thank you for everyone for tuning in.
Can we take a picture before we leave?
Sure. I don't know who's taking the picture.
I could just end as also say, for the reporters will know a number of announcements we made. We mentioned how Yukon was getting special treatment, far more per capita than other parts of the country. So as the minister said, this Carve Out is in addition to the regular program, which Yukon can still apply for. And it's not often, there's over 300 ridings in the country that you get, if you get a federal minister once in the 4 years of a mandate, for a funding announcement, that's great, but now we've had the minister 2 weeks in a row, so that's pretty exciting for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.